Order!
This is the terrible Shrek the Third. Easily the worst entry in the franchise. Sure, I guess there are some people that aren't really fussed about the fourth movie. They should consider rewatching it. That movie's a lot more than just the do the raw gag. But truly, so far anyway, this is the worst Shrek movie. And don't get me wrong, there are some solid individual gags and moments in this movie, as we will get into, but that's simply just not enough to forgive what is just a story that can't work out what it is. And following on from two absolute masterpieces that built DreamWorks as a powerhouse studio, a bad story with one funny gag every so often just isn't enough. And judging by the marketing, this movie was supposed to be about Shrek figuring out parenting. I mean, the first big teaser we had of Shrek the Third was Shrek dealing with a baby vomiting from a pram. Ugh. And I guess that makes sense. We've done marriage, honeymoon, and meeting the in-laws. So of course, that makes sense for the next stage in the story. But of course, it never really worked out that way. And even skipping ahead to the fourth movie, he just flat out abandons ship on his family and travels back in time after 15 minutes. So clearly flubbing this monumental stage of his life, let's see how Shrek the Third kind of went with things. Well, actually, we start things off with a pretty clever concept.
Prince Charming!
I like that they parallel the opening of Shrek 2 with Prince Charming, only to completely turn it on its head to show what a complete loser he's become, whilst also foreshadowing the end of this movie at the same time. As we soon see, Shrek the Third is a direct continuation of Shrek 2, as opposed to the definitive shift we had from Shrek 1 to Shrek 2.
Whoa there, Chauncey!
I hate dinner theater. Me too.
We're still in Far, Far Away, and Prince Charming is the villain again, with a very similar endgame. And I don't blame that direction. Prince Charming was still around after the second movie, after all, and Far, Far Away makes for a really interesting setting where you can explore more ideas.
Birthday to thee. Happy birthday to thee.
Do you mind?
However, where Shrek 2 avoided criticism of just repeating the first movie by going somewhere completely different in terms of setting and story, it feels like Shrek the Third doesn't do itself any favors by staying in that same Shrek 2 playpen. Even later on, when the Shrek gang head off on their quest, which in itself seems to be going after the first movie's mojo there, we still have Fiona and the villain knocking about in Far, Far Away. Rupert Everett is still entertaining as Charming in this movie, but it's hard to ignore that the character generally worked better as second banana to the fairy godmother. Nonetheless, this reintroductory scene with him in the washed-up has-been role fits him very nicely, with him taking on work in dinner theater, complete with a quick nod to the Monty Python coconuts gag. There are two pythons in this movie after all, so fair enough.
Prepare, foul beast, to enter into a world of pain with which you are not familiar.
Huh, that's a pretty cool touch that they basically sneak the end of the movie into the first scene. Though interesting that this restaurant would have a show featuring Shrek as a villain at this point. I'm guessing Charming probably wrote this himself. I guess that's your explanation, or it's a flaw.
Shrek!
However, following a little dressing room cry, we do get a first taste of him having a more generic villain role this time around.
No one will stand in my way.
Sorry, the Saturday morning cartoon wants its dialogue back. We then join the main cast in the palace.
You know, you really need to get yourself a pair of jammies.
Complete with the obligatory Eel song number playing over Shrek fulfilling royal duties. A fun sequence with that familiar, blunt Shrek style of humor. By which I mean, instead of just falling over or something generic, we have him trying to knight someone by accidentally stabbing him.
I knight thee.
We have him try and launch off a ship, but throws the bottle so hard he sinks it and it sets on fire. That's very much, the Shrek humor that I enjoy. There's a more brutal edge to it than other animated movie fare. Even him getting caught having his butt scratched, I don't mind, as that's consistent with the other Shrek openings of having that more grotesque humor to it.
What's your name?
Fiddlesworth, sir.
Perfect.
I do wonder though, what that guy's life is. Is butt scratching his job and he's just consistently on hand to do that? Where is Fiddlesworth these days? Is that his formal job? Is butt scratching all that he does and he's just constantly on hand to do that? I like to think so. Honestly, I'd say this opening sets us up for this movie to be another solid Shrek entry. That's not what happens, but hey, at least they had a good start. And from the shenanigans that ensue, it becomes clear that this isn't a lifestyle that really worked for Shrek. And if that's not enough, it's also time to establish the parenthood storyline.
What if
Yeah?
they were little ogre feet?
With Shrek having the classic male response to this, nerves and doubt, it adds a layer to Shrek and Fiona's dynamic that I would have loved to have seen more of. Unfortunately, they then proceed to just separate the two of them for the rest of the movie, never really having a real discussion about it beyond this point. Which is a shame because I felt like there was a lot to explore here, like Shrek's own upbringing potentially feeding into his reluctance. He does mention that his dad tried to eat him in this movie, so it wasn't like the op wasn't there, but really this baby arc seems to be just a series of side conversations from the main plot, which we're about to learn about more following another gag from this movie that I do enjoy.
Well, somebody better be dying.
I'm dying.
I'm really sorry.
And for a family movie, it's pretty ballsy of them to go for not only a deathbed scene, but one that still has irreverent humor in it. I'm guessing the humor's there to lighten up the scene, but particularly when he does the fake-out deaths, it's perhaps undercutting the emotional side of it a bit. Not much, but a little.
You're still making jokes.
There are still a couple of wholesome touches, like Shrek calling Harold dad, but the main job of this scene is to just set up the plot.
Aside from you, there is only one remaining heir.
Yes, it's time to address this movie's biggest issue, the plotline it chose to follow. This is a movie about Shrek just collecting someone else to be king. That's the grand adventure in this one. Pick up a kid from school to be king instead. As a kid, you don't really question it that much, but it is just a big letdown from the first two movies. You have these two movies that are essentially the motions of Shrek and Fiona's relationship and all of the obstacles in between. Then you have this one, where the main quest has nothing to do with that core relationship. Shrek is pretty settled on not ruling the kingdom himself from the get-go, so you have this movie with no personal agency to this main quest, with the parent arc feeling quite separate for most of the time. The other movies had at least managed to combine the adventure with emotional stakes, and that's just not the case for this one. Even the fourth movie emotionally revolves around Shrek's character. And I guess for Shrek 5, they've got room for some emotional beats with the actual daughter. Don't know where the sons went, I guess he ate those too. Every ogre eats their sons. We'll see how that turns out.
His name is Arthur.
Cool, looking forward to meeting this new character that we've never met before. I sure hope that they manage to develop him into a well-beloved character by the end of the movie and he doesn't just end up being, you know, a one-note wet blanket of a dude. Huh, could you imagine? As we head to the funeral, we go to a really niche joke that almost no one got, that being the wild choice to have Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney play with a frog choir singing it.
Say, live and let die. Live and let die.
For those who don't know, this is a really specific reference to the fact that Paul McCartney also had a children-oriented hit in the 80s called We All Stand Together by the Frog Chorus, which is made to sound like frogs are singing the song. I don't know why they did that either, but there you go, the background to a joke I'm pretty sure nobody got, and how horribly thematic that it just seemed like they chose it because it had the word die in it, and he died. Meanwhile, Prince Charming begins his grand plan to get all the villains on side, which he does by opening up the mental health talk.
They left you the unfairest of them all. And now here you are, hustling Pool to get your next meal. How does that feel?
Pretty unfair.
I also forgot, they fully name-checked Rumpelstiltskin in this movie with a completely different character design before he was in the next movie just 3 years later.
Frumpy Pigskin.
Rumpelstiltskin.
We never really see Charming get this idea, he just sort of comes out with it, but generally, I'd say this was an interesting angle to take the villains.
Someone decided that we were the losers. There are two sides to every story, and our side has not been told.
It's also an idea that the Shrek universe lends itself to, particularly with this Poisoned Apple pub being pre-established in the last movie. The first movie was all about Shrek himself being the traditional antagonist getting his side of the story, so why wouldn't the fairy tale villains want the same courtesy? It's interesting how some great ideas are floating around this movie. It's just that none of them seem to work together. In Shrek 2, Shrek's inner conflict and relationship with Fiona directly informed the villain plot. But here, they're all just doing their own thing. Shrek's about to be out exploring to find Arthur. We've got his and Fiona's parenting arc semi in there, and then we got this villain plot, completely separate. They're all there, but they just don't align as pleasingly as one working story. Shrek has basically really nothing to do with Charming taking over the kingdom until we're already into the third act. And speaking of separating storylines, we have a somewhat outdated trope in the leaving the women scene. I mean, sure, Fiona is pregnant in this scene, but we don't find that out until the end of the scene. If you couldn't be bothered to bring Fiona into the adventure here, sidelining her once again, then at least reveal the legitimate reason she can't go already on the table. This is why I like the fourth one. They actually return some agency to her character that is sort of missing from both of the middle two movies. Like, there's not really a clear reason that she's not going here. She just sort of doesn't go. That's the men's job, I guess. In being contradictory to the standard traditional Disney movie, they accidentally picked up some of the dodgy tropes of a classic Disney princess movie.
You're going to be a father!
That's great!
With a parting gift of the news, which they can now be separated for the next 40 minutes on runtime to not challenge their relationship whatsoever. I guess DreamWorks didn't really want to have the Shrek considers abortion scene plugged into in the middle of their movie. Maybe that is a little too edgy to put in the middle of your Disney princess parody. No, instead, it's just this quest plot to recapture the first movie, whilst the villains do something they'll spend most of the movie having no awareness of. We do then get a dream sequence, so the baby at least has some imaginary presence earlier in the movie. And I'm sure any parents found this horror-tone nightmare with the pram particularly funny in some kind of cathartic way. Vomit sequence from the trailer, fully intact. I remember this being the one sequence we got in the teaser trailer. Somehow. Why do I remember that after all this time? But again, this is what we thought the movie was going to be, rather than the college collection service plot that we actually got. The kids don't even really get born. You'd think it would be that they are born, and that's the trial this movie. And following on from the most disturbing shot in the franchise, we do get some semblance of the characters discussing this properly, with 3 male characters discussing parenthood, something you don't really actually get that often, so that's nice.
Look, having a baby is not going to ruin your life.
And again, like, there's some good stuff in here. It just doesn't excuse the weak story that they've decided to put it through.
Worcestershire?
It's Worcestershire.
Like the sauce? It's spicy!
That being said, I love the medieval reimagining of a high school. It's just one of those concepts that allows for more of those trademark Shrek jokes. Like a stoner gag.
Don't burn all my frankincense and myrrh.
And on to the introduction of the plot stealer himself, Arthur, who is of course the loser. The Chicken Little of Worcestershire, if you will.
That dork over there is Arthur.
Hey!
Expressed through dialogue that is worthy of comparison to that movie.
Artie a king? More like the mayor of Loserville.
Is that the best you could come up with? As for the loser king, he's voiced by the drunk driving king himself, Justin Timberlake.
So wait, I'm really the only heir.
And it just sounds like him saying lines a lot of time as opposed to a character. He has funny moments. I wouldn't say he's necessarily a bad actor. It's just there are points where it does just sound like Timberlake reading lines. It's the one thing I'd say is better in DreamWorks' later efforts with the Trolls franchise, where he's at least doing a better performance on those. And I do like the fact that there's a complete accident that they had an actual Justin Timberlake reference in Shrek 2 at the time when he was going out with Cameron Diaz, and I don't think the animators knew that. It was just an overlapping of Hollywood culture at that time. But I guess canonically, Fiona should question his voice, since she's clearly a fan of his music. But no, Timberlake's Arthur character kind of rings more true of a guest voice for a Simpsons cameo, if that makes sense. Introducing a character like Arthur should have had an impact akin to Puss in Boots in the second movie, but I just never quite buy into his character. It's also just kind of weird that he just looks like a weedy teenage version of Prince Charming, which becomes more obvious later on when they're in the same frame. It's a weird character design complaint in the Shrek franchise. Meanwhile, Fiona's having a baby shower, having only just told Shrek that she's pregnant in the first place.
Oh. You know the baby's gonna love it because I do.
Also, what's interesting here is that the UK audience had a very interesting experience between the second and third movie. See, Doris here had the voice of British chat show host Jonathan Ross dubbed onto Doris in Shrek 2, with a sort of nasally Cockney voice. So color a surprise when she pops up in Shrek the Third and sounds like Larry King.
A baby is only gonna strengthen the love that Shrek and Fiona have.
Nonetheless, love that for her that she's with the princesses now, as she absolutely deserves to be. But no time for any more discussing the hardships of motherhood. The villain is now just starting to happen.
Onward, my new friends, to our happily ever after!
The takeover sequence does have its moments, from the trees releasing leaves as a parachute to a Hooters joke. Okay. But my personal favorite is the Cyclops finding joy in just ripping stamps off of people's mail. The guy likes his simple pleasures. I think that the two things this movie had going for it was the parenting arc and the villain plot. And if they'd found a way to marry the two better a little bit, maybe we could have gotten a better movie. Hey there, you've made it to the halfway mark of this video, so come along and subscribe if you're interested in more terrible movies. Somehow, there's still loads of terrible DreamWorks to cover. We'll get around to all of them eventually. So thank you for joining along if you have, and let's get back to the second half of DreamWorks' terrible Shrek 3. And if they'd found a way to marry the two better a little bit, maybe we could have gotten a better movie. Make this villain revolution the main focus. Get rid of the Arthur questline, and have Shrek and the gang going underground in the wake of his takeover, with Shrek and Fiona worrying about the ramifications for their children and the future of the kingdom, adding depth to their parenting arc. Maybe even play out Shrek feeling the pressure to take over as king throughout the movie before finally being honest about not wanting to do that, rather than having him write it off immediately. Having a whole being true to yourself kind of arc, with the conclusion being, I'm ready for a family, but at our home, the swamp. That's how you do it. Not by removing the main characters from the main conflict to find some kid. Because the villain takeover stuff, I like. Random kid becomes king, I don't know. But even with the villain stuff, it all feels a little bit and then story-wise. Because again, in the first two movies, everything for both heroes and villains were in direct consequence and agency of each other. Here, you've got the main characters on a completely different story until over half an hour later, in which the villains turn up with a completely unrelated plan. Some individual bits I enjoy too, like this stalling sequence of Gingy, Pinocchio, and the pigs distracting the villains. From Gingy's life flashing before his eyes to Pinocchio having to work around the fact that he cannot lie.
On the contrary, with any amount of uncertainty that I undeniably...
Stop it! They always seem to find a great bit of this version of Pinocchio, which is why the Shrek 5 teaser is just all the more disappointing when he just randomly popped up like this. Whoa! Also, riddle me this. How did Puss in Boots 2 manage to fit Puss into the movie with a different art style, yet make the character look exactly the same? And why can't Shrek 5 do that with any of their characters? Anyway, then we head back to the Arthur storyline because they've committed to it now.
This is gonna be huge. Parties, princesses, castles, princesses.
Like, the plot here is that he's just been handed this luxury lifestyle on a plate, but will still have to go on an arc where he doubts himself and all the rest of it, crashing the boat in the process. Best character ever. Though it's here that we begin to see at least an attempt to make the Arthur character tie into the parenting emotional plotline.
You get back here, young man, and I mean it!
As it becomes clear that Shrek will learn the responsibilities of a parent through this pseudo-son figure. It's the one argument for Artie's relevance to the movie that I will accept. Doesn't mean that they couldn't have done it better and signposted those themes a little bit stronger, but it's there nonetheless. There are fragments of a good movie in here. And then there's Merlin.
Can I interest anyone in a snack or beverage?
I hate to say it because he's voiced by the legendary Eric Idle, but this character feels like a time-wasting obstacle, where the movie's gotta entertain this guy's existence for 10 minutes with some soul-searching followed by Puss and Donkey swapping bodies. And I guess this is meant to be the mandatory transformation theme that happens in every movie. Is a stretch. Beyond that, Merlin doesn't have anything to add to the story, beyond a quick jump to avoid narrative journey time. And you can have characters like that, Robin Hood coming to mind, but the difference is they took very little time and were an obstacle for the journey, not a pause in it. But first, more back and forth between Shrek and Artie, where they stuff in that his dad left him and the other things to make him feel like a character. Meanwhile, the princesses have gone underground with a couple decent gags.
Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down thy golden extensions.
You know, honestly, I don't blame Rapunzel for turning on them after this.
Woof.
Oh. Right, so the going underground stuff didn't last very long. They're immediately captured, along with an interesting line.
Not here, Kitten Whiskers. Danny will discuss it later.
And at last, nearly an hour in, Shrek and the gang know that the villain plot is actually happening.
Kill 'em all, except the fat one.
And it's a fun enough fight sequence, though the animation goes particularly Shrek 1 at points. They also give up pretty easily as soon as they destroy Hook's piano, and also, how did they find them in the first place? With the B team defeated and the threat communicated, it's time for Merlin's one function to show itself.
Let's help our friends get back soon.
Launching us into the aforementioned Puss and Donkey side gag.
I feel all exposed and nasty.
Well, I hope they're happy they did something with those characters. Transported and distorted, they head into the newly branded Go Go Away.
Shrek's final performance?
You didn't tell us you were in a play?
Indeed. Charming's grand plan beyond taking over the city is getting the last laugh with the play that he was doing at the start of the movie. Going for another sort of performance ending, but you're never gonna beat the fairy godmother's song number.
Our happily ever after is nearly complete, Mummy.
And another moment to remind us that this character simply worked better in Shrek 2. I think that his Once Upon a Time, Someone Decided We Are Losers arc works in the context of the defeat of the second movie, but otherwise, a lot of the charming character in this movie is just retreading what we saw of the guy last time round. You don't have that refreshed antagonist like you got between Farquaad and the fairy godmother with Charming. We just have Charming here. Again. And then we get the redesigned Rumpelstiltskin in the fourth. It almost feels random at that point because we stayed with the same antagonist for the previous two movies.
This boy is supposed to be the new king of Far, Far Away.
I mean, he just looks like a small version of you. Is it that weird? But yes, this is the shot I was talking about. They basically have the same haircut.
Now stand still so I won't make a mess.
I don't know if you can have a decapitation that isn't messy. Is that just me?
You weren't really next in line for the throne.
I was.
Shrek then does the classic insult the character so he leaves for his own good bit.
Maybe you're not as big of a loser as I thought.
Also, here's some more Fiona slander going on here. Surely she's the one directly in line for the throne. Why Shrek, not just the Prince Philip of the situation? I get story-wise, it's easier for him to be grumpy about it if he's the one with the responsibility, but they don't really do anything interesting with that plot thread anyway. It's not like this is our universe where you need to uphold a traditional monarchy paradigm. Even the modern version of the real monarchy would have Fiona get the big gig by now. As Artie storms off, it looks like we better get a line in there that reminds us that this is supposed to tie into the parenthood arc.
You really do have a way with children, Shrek.
What a great way to lead into the obligatory moody scene for the sad bit that they've done in every installment.
Leave me out with the waste. This is not what I do.
And following this montage of Arthur being grumpy and Shrek getting chained to be executed, we then go to the prison with all the other characters, including the continuation of making the princesses just funny little side characters for Fiona.
The cat turned into a little horse that smells like feet. What's to get?
I'm not sure this fully works. A lot of their interactions feel a bit insult-led. However, they do have some solid gags too.
Ladies, assume the position.
What are you doing?
Waiting to be rescued.
Also, just to acknowledge the Queen's role throughout this movie has kind of just been predominantly frowning by Fiona. Until now, when she smashes her head through a wall.
You didn't actually think you got your fighting skills from your father, did you?
What a forced cluster of a line that was. But also, honestly, I kind of loved it. Like, I guess in a sense, it really does make sense. Helps add a bit more personality to the family, anyway. But moving on to the finale, the open-air theater for Charming's play is some amazing design work. The clouds are curtains, Hook leading an orchestra on a boat, it just looks amazing. It's convincing, whilst also being something too complex to realize in the real world. Meanwhile, Shrek gets inadvertently parent-shamed by the Cyclops of all characters.
Who would have thought a monster like me deserves something as special as you?
Also, for all of his faults, you gotta appreciate that Charming added a bring your own kid to work day so early into his reign. Beyond here, the third act climax is definitely the strongest bit, specifically when it comes to trying to live up to the giant gingerbread man heist of the second movie. I'm of course referring to the most unexpected insert of the immigrant song of all time. I'm sorry, Justice League Wonder Woman. Snow White had you beat here. Same to you too, Thor Ragnarok. I'm afraid this is probably the one thing that Shrek the Third actually did better than you somehow. I also still don't have any idea how they got the initial, more classical song version past the Disney lawyers. For me, this moment here makes Snow White hanging around the rest of the movie actually worth it. It's the best part of the movie, guys. I wouldn't be surprised if they came up with this power move before any of the actual plot. It's just a great idea, a worthy highlight of the Shrek franchise. And it doesn't stop there. You got Cinderella using her glass slipper as a boomerang weapon, Sleeping Beauty falling to the ground to knock the guards over. I absolutely dig the Princess Avengers gig they've got going on here. In a movie that seemed to initially sideline Fiona for a good bit as well, it's great that she gets to lead the third act rescue operation here. And Artie finally gets the memo on what actually happened so he can stop moping to the depression song.
Charming was going to kill you, Artie. Shrek saved your life.
Pretty impressive it took him so long to do that walk as well. Like, in the time it took him to walk to that point, Puss in Boots got thrown in prison, the Queen headbutted them out of jail, they devised this whole plan and have infiltrated the palace, whilst these characters then actually managed to get ahead of Artie. All the while, we have Charming's bad play, which is sort of funny, I guess.
My plate of love you'd eat.
To which Shrek chooses to at least get some laughs in with his final moments. Pretty in line with his character, actually, though personally, I think the delivery's a bit wooden.
Ooh, if you don't mind, could you kill me and then sing?
And as Dragon flies in, you have to wonder, couldn't she just eat him like she did with Farquaad? She wasn't there in the second one, so that resolution wasn't there, but come on, you've got the dragon this time. Story-wise, though, of course, that would have been pretty boring. Though I could totally see a moment of him being eaten and then talking to Farquaad in her stomach for some reason. I wonder what they would say. But nah, instead, they're just gonna have Justin Timberlake do a speech. Much more interesting.
You're telling me you just want to be villains your whole lives?
And yes, this goes on for a whole minute of here's the message for the kids at home. All the checkpoints are there, right down to the advice Shrek threw in earlier. And of course, yay, it works. The villains put down their weapons because this kid said some stuff. I guess it's leadership. Except Charming, who's ready to give Shrek his fake death moment and future meme face.
No!
And to be fair, it is the dragon who finishes off Charming, but knocking down the tower this time.
Mummy?
You get it? It's like the opening scene. Well done, movie. I guess. All followed by Artie accepting the crown and becoming king. Which does make me wonder if he's still there in Shrek 5 if they actually go back to Far, Far Away, as at least implied by the end of The Last Wish. Like, maybe? Is he old now? What haircut's he gonna have now? And finally, we have the proper reunion of the core tenemental relationship of this franchise, Shrek and Fiona, only now, with Shrek now ready to be a father. I suppose it's a healthy thing to show that sometimes space is good for accepting these big life shifts, but I feel like there could have been some more interesting scenes if you actually had the two together sometimes. Not that I exactly want like a portable magic mirror FaceTime. Oh god, that's what they're gonna do in Shrek 5, isn't it? It's a portable mirror. Magic mirror. And everyone's going, oh god, I hate that. But no, here we are. The babies from the marketing are now here in the final scene. I can see why they'd be an obstacle if they'd been there for the whole movie, but maybe don't market the movie like they were more prominent than they actually were, you know? It's a nice enough ending though. Finally getting Shrek home for the first time in almost 3 hours of franchise. And shock horror, yet another Eels song. Just a fun montage of them doing the parenting thing, with Puss getting the treatment of Sunnyside Daycare in Toy Story 3. And that's it, that's Shrek the Third. It certainly has its moments, and I actually really liked it as a kid for all of those moments, but the story just doesn't live up to the previous two. You have 3 different things that don't really relate to another, just doing their own thing until the third act. Artie never really interested me as a character, to the extent I wasn't really invested in him taking the throne. Like, cool. Some kid who's had a hard time at school's now the king. Like, I think there's a version of that character that could have been interesting, just not the way they did it here. And whilst the story was so good in Shrek 2 that I didn't mind that Fiona was slightly sidelined, it didn't feel like they really made up for it in this one. Like, come on, she's the pregnant one. How does that make her feel, other than that one scene where she's eating more cake than usual? Pregnancy, according to Shrek the Third, is you just have more cravings for cake and that's about it. There's some good gags, as well as gags retreading the same ground as the first two, and then there's all sorts that just didn't work. Merlin being the one I really wasn't bothered about at all. But at the end of the day, this is kind of the skippable Shrek movie. And anyway, soon enough, it's gonna lose its title as the worst Shrek movie of all. Probably. But yes, that was DreamWorks' terrible Shrek the Third. For now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell me your thoughts on Shrek the Third. What's the best moment? What would you have done to change it? You've heard my thoughts already on how to adapt the plotline. I'd love to hear some good pitches for the third movie, connected all to the threads of the franchise's core themes. I'd love to hear all your thoughts and more, but also, you can still love this movie. I still kinda do. It's a weird one. And I shall see you all in a little bit. Cheerio!